Hi, Com 110. We Now we would like to start with chapter 18, and with chapter 18 we will be talking about reasoning. So understand the two types, the inductive and deductive types of reasoning, learn the different forms of reasoning, and identify some of the errors that we as speakers we make in in our speeches. So for types of reasoning, so the reasoning process explain how the reasons you supply connects to the conclusion you make. And there are generally two types of reasoning. We have the deductive reasoning. So with the deductive reasoning, you're starting from like something uh, uh, like general. It's a kind of a fact, and then you are uh, from like general to the specific, and you are trying to find a conclusion for your specific depending in its relation to the general, like a kind of theory. When you have a theory in communication and then you try to prove something else, something that could adapt that theory. And in doing that we have some premises that we use. So we have the major premise, like let's say as an example, the major premise when we say all men are moral. And the minor promise that we make, we say Socrates is a man. And a conclusion, Socrates is moral. Since Socrates is a man, then Socrates is a moral. And this kind of like a syllogism is called the categorical syllogism, when we use like a depend on the members membership in a group to decide our conclusion. And we have like a number, like we have B, disjunctive syllogism. The disjunctive syllogism, uh, it depends on the either or. When we have two cases and it's either this or that. So as an example of it, we have, say, the major, as an example, the major premise, we have this key will unlock either my car or my door. Then we have the minor premise, the key does not unlock my house or my door. Then conclusion is, therefore the key will unlock my car or unlock my car. So notice that this syllogism still deduces the proper conclusion by excluding one of the two alternatives stated in the major premise. So it is called disjunctive because the two aspects of the premise are mutually exclusive and they cannot coexist together. The third one, we have the conditional syllogism. The conditional syllogism depends on the idea of if and then. So it's a syllogism in which the major premise contains a hypothetical condition and its outcome. So this is usually used for hypothetical situation or planning for the future. So the premise, when we adopt both like a quotation, if then, let's say for the example, major premise, if I take the bus home, then I will save money on transportation. So the minor premise is I will take the bus home. The conclusion will be, therefore, I will save money on transportation. It's again, it depends on the if then. If I take this, then this will happen. And the second type of the reasoning is the inductive reasoning. It's opposite to the deductive reasoning. Now it's this kind is a more probable. It's not absolute like the deductive. This one is probable, for like when we start with something specific and try to reach something general. And with inductive reasoning, you begin with like a particular piece of evidence and use them to construct a probable conclusion. With inductive reasoning, we need more evidence and support to reach like to reach a good conclusion at the end. we have like forms of reasoning. Whether you are delivering an informative or a persuasive speech, you will always need a more strong connection between the information you provide and the claims that you make. So properly employing solid reasoning enables your audience to understand the points you are making while also bolstering your credibility with your audience. We have four different reasoning forms. So we have the cause reasoning, the example reasoning, the analogy reasoning, and the sign reasoning. For the cause reasoning, it's an argument that claim one event or factor produce another event. So making a cause-effect relationship between one event and its cause. And the second, number two, we have reasoning by example, the process of inferring general conclusion and making general claims from specific cases. Like when reasoning by example, you take a number of specific realities and arrive at an overall conclusion about them. For example, uh, when we say example one, my biology class was hard. Example two, my chemistry class was tough. Example three, my astronomy class was difficult. So the conclusion will be science classes present a real challenge to me. When reasoning by example, the occurrences must be related. So the level of the relations between the example make the conclusion to be stronger. While if we change it, one of these example, instead of chemistry with art or with another, like another material, the relation between them will be weak, and we would not be concluding from the reasoning by example in that case. The third type is reasoning by analogy, comparing two similar cases in order to argue that what is true of one case is also true of the other case. And analogy differs from examples reasoning because they they don't need to have more than one similar instances to make that comparison. Essentially, reasoning by analogies try to argue for common elements between different cases also. As an example, so we have two types of analogy, reasoning by analogy. We have the literal and we have the figuratives. So the literal analogies, when the two cases being compared are classified the same way. Let's say when we have two schools, so they are the same classification, and finding like a way in teaching one topic in one school, we could adopt it in the other schools. And the claim that we are making, we are saying that the literal analogy is telling us, since both of the schools classified in the same classification, then this example would be applicable to both of them. Then we have the figurative analogy, when two cases being compared are from completely different classification. So when, let's say for an example, you compare a business person to a politician, so they are completely two different fields, but when you take an aspect that both of them share, let's say this business person will be a good politician or good policymaker. It's we taking the leadership aspects of both of them, concluding that this person will be good at this aspect. Reasoning by sign, it occurs, sometimes when we see that like a smoke coming up from a place, it's a sign that's telling us there's a fire over there. And it can also, happen with the characteristics. I mean, like if to be a president of the United States, you have to be 35 years old. And therefore, we conclude that the president of the United States is at least 35 years old. And a fallacy, we have some fallacies that sometimes are tricky. They confuse us in making our claims, and they confuse the audience also. So a fallacy is an error in reasoning. Some are easy to detect, yet others are more elusive to identify. So the first type of the fallacies is ad hominem. Ad hominem, attacking the person's character instead of the person's argument. So instead of trying to argue of what the person was saying and justify or saying, opposing to his point of view, we are attacking the personality of that person or the character of that person. Number two, we have advercandum. Advercandum is an appeal to authority. This fallacy asserts that the positional authority. Because I'm parent, I can ask my kids have to take the trash out. It's not logical, but I'm using my position, my power to making that reasoning. And number three, the slippery slope. The slippery slope fallacy relies on the belief that once a course of action takes place, you cannot stop it. The idea of the dominoes, if you hit the first dominoes, it will go and fall all the dominoes till the end. Unfortunately, the outcomes will be negative. Non sequitur or none in number four, non sequitur or none in sequence. It refers to making an unjustified move from one idea to another. So let's say a person has like a piece of furniture, a fancy piece of furniture, or a person is driving a fancy car. So we conclude that that person is rich. It could be right, but at the same time, that person could be renting that car, rented that car, or it could be like paying loans for that car. Number five, we have a straw man. It happens when the speaker distorts the actual position of an opponent. In a straw man fallacy, the speaker misrepresents the component position by oversimplifying the position, taking the opponent's component out of the context so that they don't represent the opponent's position at all, or representing an entire group's position with really bad argument from one of the members in the group and trying to just focusing on that member's point of view and say it applied to all the group. Number six, hasty generalization. It refers to the drawing conclusion about broad principles or categories based upon a small sample of evidence. When we try to talk about a topic, when we find climate change, depending on one source saying climate change is not real, while there's hundreds or thousands of other sources that say climate change is real. Either or. The number seven is either or. Either or, it says like whether it taking two alternatives, saying whether it's this one or that one, while when you come to the reality, it's more than two alternatives. Number eight is false cause. False cause, it assumes that one event causes another unrelated event to occur. This is why it's always important to seek a connection between the event and the causes to the event. Number nine, the red herring. It happens when the speaker introduces irrelevant idea to focus attention away from the real issue. Number 10, begging the question. When we beg the question, when we assume certain facts that have not been proven. Thank you. That's the end of my chapter 18. So a quick note. Send me email if you have any questions. Tomorrow at 1, I will be on my computer. I may open the Zoom in and listen to any questions that you guys have.